Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we won't go through all the formalities because this is a continuation of last night's meeting. You got off easy, Carol. So. Staff.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Before we move into the new topics that are scheduled for tonight's presentation, we wanted to spend just a few moments to finish off the tail end of our conversation with you last night regarding the general fund operating budget, and in particular, it was not my intent to spend any specific time going through either the city manager's office, the city council, the elected city clerk, or the city treasurer's office in any particular detail, primarily because those budgets are relatively smaller and have remained at a virtual status quo level. We are happy to take any questions or comments that you have, and maybe what I could do is ask you to hold those for just a second, because I did commit to an opportunity for the city attorney to talk to you about that department's budget. She's ready at the table there. So if we could start there and then jump back to any tail end of items or issues for the general fund, then we would like to move forward into the enterprise funds and some of the special revenue funds, and that will be the agenda for tonight.
Okay. You're on, Pamela.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening about my budget. You know, the goals that are contained in the package are specific, and I really think instead they should be articulated this way, that the goal of the legal department is really to minimize legal risk and the attendant financial exposure to the city. In these uncertain times, I would just emphasize that I think that the need is greater and not less. Now, as you know, the need for legal resources arises from, the need for legal services arises from several different sources. Sometimes from the City Council itself, for example, the current FCC action that you currently have going against Comcast, which has at the heart of it a challenge to the rates that Comcast has been charging, and therefore, you know, your interest is in protecting the customers of San Bruno Cable. Sometimes the need for legal services arises through staff and through other bodies. For example, our development projects have been intimately involved with the Treetops, which is now in its third iteration. Advising the Planning Commission on different issues such as telecommunications facilities and other projects. Sometimes the need or the legal services are initiated by the legal department itself. For example, when we see the need to revise ordinances that we have or to address issues as they come up. And finally, the need also arises from outside sources where we see claims and litigation. These range from trip and falls, occasionally on the city streets, water or sewer backups, and litigation. And we always have one or two major pieces of litigation ongoing at any particular time. Now, the delivery of those services come through three sources: city attorney, legal secretary, and special counsel services. As you know, you have one full-time city attorney, that's me, and I have 3/4 of a secretary who assists, and just so it's clear, I do want to emphasize that she has basically been running the tort program for these many years and has been excellent at doing that. She also provides backup and support for HR, and with the loss of the HR secretary, we are having to realign how some of the reception services are delivered. And also when she's absent, there is, because she fills in for the, well, 1/4 of her provides workers' comp support. So when she herself is absent, that creates a bigger burden in the HR department as well. So it works kind of both ways. But lastly, and most importantly for your budgetary consideration, is the issue of outside counsel or special counsel services. So special counsel is utilized in litigation primarily, or where specialized knowledge is required, such as in redevelopment, or precise skills that are necessary to certain land use applications, or with the cable TV department. We also utilize what we call ABAG panel counsel which is discussed in the self-insurance and liability section in your books, I think at page 271. We utilize those to address particular kinds of cases that are covered by, it's not exactly insurance, but it's pooled risk that we use there. One thing that is currently under discussion with the Finance Department is whether we should add an additional type of protection, and that is employment discrimination insurance. So that's under investigation at this time through the Finance Director. In utilizing outside counsel, what I try to do there is balance the risks between the exposure that we have on any particular issue and the expenditures. So we have been consistent over the past few years in keeping to the same range. This year to date, for all funds other than for your self-insurance fund, so all funds, whether it's general fund, water, cable, redevelopment, developer, or capital projects, comes to currently about $300,000 for all funds, with not counting for any offsets. For example, with developer reimbursement, which currently runs to about $40,000 so far this year, and probably will be $60,000 by the end of the fiscal year. What that means is those are amounts that will kind of come off of that bottom line because the developer is paying for those legal services directly. And from the general fund, roughly $100,000 at this point in the year. Our target is to keep it within the budgetary constraints of last year, $150,000. And it looks like we're on target to do that also this year. So we are not looking for any particular changes. They are basically keeping to the same level of service and the same expenditures. That is consistent with our expenditures in the last couple of years, and also periodically you receive sort of a 5-year picture from me. It is consistent with that. As to any changes that we've made to program services or deliveries, a couple of changes have made in the department to try and reduce expenditures. One was to try to move from always the necessity to have the legal books in the paper format to electronic, where that's been feasible and practicable. So we've done that. And also, as you know, this year I instituted a pilot program using the services of some pro bono attorneys who have provided their services for free. And those are attorneys who are most recently graduated from law school. So they do require a good deal of supervision and can only work on limited things. But so far that's been successful. So at this time I wanted to see if you have any other questions for me.
Speaking about that pro bono, can you put a dollar value on what that, what they provide?
That is an excellent question. I can put it more, probably I'm better able to frame it in the amount of time that they have given to us. Originally we started with 3, and 2 of them now have jobs, which is great for them. And we continue to have 1 other attorney. And she puts in 2 days a week, as the others did for several months. And even junior attorneys, at any basic law firm, that would be charged out closer to $180 an hour, something on par with that. So it's been a considerable savings to the city. And actually, I will try and calculate that out for you and send you a report on what the financial equivalent would be.
Valuable service.
It is.
It's very smart of you to do it, to get it done.
Thank you.
Any questions of the city attorney?
Real quick, my only one question was back to the pro bono. And how much time do you think that takes from you to oversee that aspect of it? And at what point do you think you'll review and make a determination whether that's a successful program that you want to continue on?
So I'd like to do it for at least 6 months in order to evaluate the effectiveness. And the issue of the time is hard to quantify. But what I can tell you is that with any piece of work that they are delivering, they may go off and research something. Let's say they put in 20 hours of research. When they bring back to me a product, either through an oral report or through something on paper, I need to really spend a good amount of time, sometimes a half an hour or 45 minutes, going through with them, making sure that they really understood the material and have come to a correct recommendation about that. And also does require me to do my own check by spot checking cases that they have read or relied upon and considered. So it's hard to quantify it in the hours, but I would say it does take a concerted effort on my part that I wouldn't have to utilize if I were paying a more experienced attorney to do that same work.
Okay. Michael?
Going back to the legal services line, it looks like the amount is fairly consistent across years, and I'm wondering that in certain years, I imagine there are greater needs to bring in outside assistance, and in some years you may not need very much at all. And I'm wondering how that amount has met the need historically.
The amount for the Special Services Council? Well, usually it's been closer to $200,000. The way I've been able to deliver it a smaller or decrease the amount is by spreading out what we do. So really prioritizing certain things. I have a number of projects that I'm not starting till the next fiscal year. For example, last year, a major project was to revise all of our contract forms for public works, and they have a whole new procedure, a handbook on processing those contracts, and that's really been wonderful. But the other component that goes with that is making sure that the municipal code is structured, follows that same structure, and bringing the two to work together very, very well. And so I have put that off until the next fiscal year, where if I was operating at the same level before with $200,000, I would have taken care of that this year. A number of other ordinances that I would have moved forward had I had that money available.
Okay, thank you.
I could add that, we've talked about this in the past, that before your tenure here, there was very low budgeted amounts for outside legal service, and it was blown out of the water, and sometimes as much as twice or three times as much, from what I remember. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes?
I
City manager?
It's a look of
I just thought to round this off in a sort of a more methodical way, what I'll do is just give you a very brief snapshot, a few overview comments for the remaining general fund departments and operations, the city clerk, the city treasurer, city council, and the city manager, if that's acceptable
Please,
to the
yeah.
city council. And actually taking off on a comment in your discussion just now with the city attorney, I would say that the most significant factor that both guided and is represented in these several budgets is that they have remained almost virtually flat with respect, by comparison to prior years. And where there have been one-time costs, I mentioned one of these last night, and it's probably the most significant change from the prior year is the reduction of the one-time cost in the city in the city clerk's office for the conduct of the election, which occurs in odd-numbered years here in San Bruno. It's important and it's significant to identify that, because with the tight budget philosophy that we are using, we are unfortunately also subjected to some annual variation in costs when those one-time costs do occur. But we've taken the route that I think is prudent in this environment to avoid budgeting contingency costs, which we have in the past, and to avoid budgeting, as an example, again, the election costs or anything that resembles that in years where that obviously is not happening. So your budgets do not stay actually flat, but they are prepared tightly around the strict interpretation of the necessary operating requirements. In particular, I would call out a couple of things. The City Council's budget is intended to cover the stipend that does not resemble a salary, but provides a very small amount for city council members, primarily for your personal expenses associated with the voluntary responsibilities of city council elected official office. And the budget covers probably the largest single cost item is the amount that is necessary to cover association memberships for those organizations such as the League of California Cities, the Association of Bay Area Governments, and other similar organizations that provide service to the organization as a whole, and for which the membership is of benefit to the organization, again, taken as a whole. In the other aspects of the city council's budget, and again, as elected officials, you have responsibilities to represent the city in a wide variety of regional organizations and activities, and there is a relatively modest amount of resources that are provided to, again, provide for those memberships, but also to cover legitimate minimal expenses associated with your representation of the city in those venues. The city manager's office, as you know, consists of two full-time staff members, myself, the city manager, and the executive assistant to the city manager. Between the two of us, we are responsible for the overall policy implementation and management, direction, and leadership for the entire operations of the municipal corporation. As the city attorney mentioned, and as was discussed with you last night, the elimination of one secretarial position in the Human Resources Office, with whom we function closely along with the city attorney's office, has and will continue to create the need for overlap, coverage, and support among the two full-time staff persons remaining to our three offices, with some support, as indicated last night, from the finance department as needed. And even such things as a vacation or a temporary absence of one of the administrative support staff does require a fair amount of support and sharing among other departments, simply to make sure that we're able to answer the phones, which is obviously the means by which we stay in touch with issues that are initiated by residents that require my attention or other directors' attention. The city manager's office budget includes as I mentioned before, does not include any amounts that are intended as a contingency. That was a feature of prior year's budgets that allowed for a small amount of something unexpected occurring to be covered within the city manager's signature authority. That is no longer the case, and again we have tightened this down based on historical and historical utilization, as well as anticipated operational needs. I think I'll stop there and take any questions that the council has. Unfortunately, the treasurer was here last night. He's not here today, but the city clerk here is here today as well, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Just a question on your contingency comment. I mean, so you feel that you just, if anything undetermined comes up, that you'd have some discretionary decision that you can make that could be applied directly to a specific department? Is that your feeling? I don't know why, you know, I mean, I would believe that if you had a contingency fund, that it would be for a specific part of the city, a certain department or something.
Right, I think there's that, as well as an example, perhaps initiating a little evaluation or review similar to what we're doing with the shared services with police, something smaller than that might come up, that might require a little bit of attention. Honestly, the reason I deleted it was that we have not typically utilized that, and we have the opportunity every 2 weeks to bring something to your attention. We've gotten pretty good if something comes up, even in a short turnaround, getting it to your attention and to your authorization has turned out really not to be a problem. As you know, the expenditure authority for the city manager is at a fairly modest amount of $25,000, and so it is typical that items come to your attention anyway, and so we've been able to operate, I would say, pretty effectively without that capacity.
Through the chair, the only one question or comment I had was in regards to the city council. Under the regular part-time, last time we brought this up and it was put in regards to also accepting the citywide furlough. So that was been increased $755. I would suggest that those words be placed back in, reduced back by $755, so that we again are in the general fund and are leading by example as we're asking the rest of the staff for their sacrifice that though it may be modest and may be small, I think it's the principle.
I guess so.
Through the chair.
Michael.
A few comments here. Starting with employee benefits, if, and then this is on the city council page, if any of us were to opt out of the health care benefit that we're offered, I assume that then the city incurs no cost for that particular person. And I'm wondering if this number reflects actual expenses, or is this budgeted based on possible expenditures?
This budget is based on actual expenditures and or actual exposure based on those of you who are taking, and it's been historically the fact that not all 5 city council members have typically taken the medical benefits. So we budget based on the actual exposure.
Okay. And going down to printing, copying, and binding, have we considered possibly going to 2 issues of city focus versus the 4 that we're currently doing?
No, we haven't considered that, but we have considered an alternative strategy, and I believe that this budget has not been adjusted. Is that correct? We did not reduce the cost for focus. Actually, this is something that we have not yet brought forward for the council's consideration, but the community services director has suggested that an opportunity may exist to coordinate the production of focus so that it is actually produced internal to the recreation guide, and it would have the same look and same content as the focus newsletter, but not produced and mailed separately. That's an alternative strategy that could reduce cost.
That comes out 3 times.
It comes out right now 3 times a year. Focus comes out 4 times a year. We could reduce the publication schedule for Focus. I think I prefer the other, my recommendation would be the director's suggestion if there's a desire to reduce that budget, simply because Focus has continued to be a very well-utilized and very effective way of communicating with the public. It's something that people actually do pick up and read, and we don't get a lot of people calling and saying, hey, I read Focus, but we get a lot of commentary from people just in casual interactions where they will mention that they saw something in Focus. It, as I said, continues to be probably one of the most effective ways we have of communicating, and I would say we need to do more of that rather than less of it. That's just my recommendation. So we can certainly look at alternative production methodologies if that would reduce costs.
We can reduce postage.
If we
We
could,
can reduce postage costs by combining a publication.
right.
But then I would say that we might lose the effectiveness of having a separate publication that they see in the mail, and that's the focus, where if you're including it in a, recreation services, catalog, they might get lost.
It's gonna get lost.
Yeah.
It could, and so there may be ways to mitigate that. The other thought that we haven't explored in detail with you yet, and again, the director has been very aggressive in utilizing alternative technologies for communication of community service news and information, getting a following on an e-newsletter type of approach has some cost benefits. I'm not sure I'm ready to cut the cord with something that's mailed, but
No,
I think these are things that we need to be exploring and getting more aggressive about.
But then again, you can't be left in the dust with progress.
Exactly. A lot of people are using different technologies these days. A lot of people aren't. So we want to try and balance.
A couple more things. Going back to dues and memberships, and I know we discussed this, we touched on some of these things when we looked at other departments. I was curious what we were doing overall with the entire budget with some of these things, so I went back last night and added some of these numbers up. And looking, at all dues and memberships, special events, meetings and conferences, it comes out to over $240,000 a year that we're doing all together. And certainly the part of it that is attributed to the city council is a very large chunk of it. And I certainly understand the value that we get from some of these things. At the same time, when we are reducing services and citizens are going to feel the impact, I'm wondering, really, can we make some painful choices here and choose to not participate in some of these activities? And again, some of these things may be taboo subjects that I don't really want to. I don't want to call anything out in particular, but the numbers do stand out, and I'm just wondering if there's not something there that we can evaluate. In more general terms, I think meetings and conferences, I'm wondering if some of those, maybe we could do a temporary moratorium on attending some of those things this year. Maybe leave it in the budget, but maybe decide that we may not participate in some of those. And the same thing with the dues and memberships. I realize that there are some certain certifications that our staff does need to have, and we certainly want them to have. Others that maybe are nice to haves, we can do without for a year, or we can work something out if it's not in an MOU that we have to provide that maybe we can do a sharing thing, or we pay for it every other year, to try to bring that big number down. And that's it.
One thing that we might do is we can generate a list to save you the trouble of doing that laborious calculation, and then maybe take a look at it when you see it all on one paper. Maybe that would help us to make some evaluations. I would just add
brief description on why we are members.
Exactly. Yeah, at least on the bigger ticket items. One of the things that I would just maybe this makes your concern worse, but I just for the benefit of full disclosure, the personal professional development amounts that are part of our contracts with mid-management and executive level management employees are frequently used by those individuals for specifically job-related conference training enhancements that would not otherwise be provided by the city but have a direct and immediate beneficial impact. I could give you a couple of examples that occurred just in the recent past. So I would say that there is my point is there's a conscientious effort to utilize other resources, including personal resources in some cases, where that's feasible and that it can contain the city's exposure.
Irene?
Oh, thank you. I'd like to go back to the focus a little bit and talk about it. I understand why we might look at putting it in with the Park and Rec thing, but there are many people out there that when they get the Park and Rec, they don't have children, they don't use Park and Rec, they throw it away. They don't even open it. So that's discouraging if we put in our focus in the same kind of thing. So maybe another thing we can look at is, I'm not sure what the schedule is, but maybe if we do 3 and 3 and have it, is that what Randy's looking at?
So you're reading Randy's hand signals, I guess. That was exactly what he...
But 3 and 3 and shift them so that there's more of an impact, and maybe also include some of the information in the focus. I mean, in the Park and Rec thing.
Yeah, all of the above are sort of ideas that we're exploring. I had asked Randy when he came on board, because we had a long-standing tradition, and we had one person who for a very long time had been delivering focus. I asked that in making the transfer to another staff person that we made sure that we were maintaining the continuity and that we were delivering uninterrupted service instead of making an immediate change. But I think we've got a lot of good ideas for how we might minimize cost and even, as you're indicating, potentially increase our communication exposure.
So that's
it's
why I'm
possible.
glad you're looking at it. And then
Go ahead.
on the dues and membership, on the heart of San Mateo County, is that something that can be put in redevelopment since it mostly it's concentrating on low and?
We can look at that. I don't know.
Okay, just a
We want to be
suggestion.
very careful about not doing it if it could be a problem, but
Oh,
we'll check
absolutely.
into it.
Yes, and then, well, I'm sure you'll look at the rest of them. Where's CCAG membership? Is that under, I can't remember seeing it. Is that under the
That was there.
enterprise? Under
CCAG is in the
Weed Street?
In the Public Works Administration.
Okay, I just missed it then. Thank you.
Is it possible to opt in and into Focus Online?
Yes. I don't know why not.
Would save a lot of postage.
Yes.
We have an awful lot of internet users.
Yeah, that's a terrific idea. So persons who would be benefited by that could tell us that, and we would. Now, the only problem, I guess there is one problem with that. We use a bulk mail process, and we get a significantly discounted rate. So we would have to check, because if you're pulling out certain addresses, then it actually costs more. So we'll look into it.
Save a lot of paper. So,
Everybody in that street would opt in, then we'd be good.
right, one big computer.
Through the chair. I appreciate Councilmember Salazar's comments, and also some of these line items have gone down significantly over the years. Community promotion, when I got on here, I think we were at 15,000 or something like that. So over the years,
80,000.
that has gone down because of that same concern in the budgetary constraints. The one thing is that we do have obligations to some of these meetings, and I think it behooves every one of us up here to be mindful. And I know I attended a meeting in Oakland, and traveled there for 45 minutes to go vote and left, so that it would save the city $75 from eating their lunch and having to sit probably listening to some speaker maybe I would or would not have wanted to. So there are things that each one of us, I think, can be mindful of, go the extra step, lead by example. But I think we need to be conscientious too that sometimes we need to be at some of those. But I do think each one of us have the responsibility too to be mindful of when we have expenditures or we do travel, or I've tried to reduce anything and all, honestly, because of what's occurring. But thank you.
next.
Thank you very much. So the remainder of tonight's presentations will focus on kind of a number of different topic areas, starting with the Public Services Department, and the director will be covering a couple of those operations that are shown in the general fund budget, and then moving into several of the enterprise funds. As I mentioned last night, we will be covering the cable enterprise tonight, and although we will not be covering in detail, unless you would like us to, all of the special revenue funds, we do want to provide some comments to you tonight regarding the redevelopment operation and housing set-aside funds, and we will review with you the equipment reserve and have a few other comments on a couple of the special revenue funds. If there is a topic that we have not covered by the end of tonight, we should have plenty of time so that you can let us know, and we're happy to discuss any of the other less significant items that at the council's pleasure. So with that, we'll move on to public services.
Honorable Mayor, council members, good evening, and I will try to entertain you for the next 2 hours with what great what public service department really is all about. As you know very well, public services really provide basic citywide services, in essence, transportation, drinking water, sewer discharge, stormwater, and solid waste, and also provide some support services for general government like the central garage. In order to provide those basic services, the department relies on certain systems, a transportation system, water system, sewer system, stormwater system, and to be able to achieve that goal. To administer those systems, the department is operating in many divisions. Those divisions, 3 divisions: stormwater division, wastewater, administration, engineering, water, solid waste, and, how I said, central garage. For each of those divisions, you see the budget and also the staffing level. Overall, you can see from a general review of the proposed budget and the staffing level that you will see a hold the line approach and strategy through all of those divisions. I will not, it's not my intent today to really take you through all of the details of each divisions, but I will just highlight some of those service areas and to bring to your attention some of the important challenges and strategies for providing those services. How I mentioned in the beginning that based on the city manager direction, our department were focusing, developing this budget recommendation, applied basic strategies across the board through all of our service area. And the main strategy was really to hold the line, to improve efficiency as much as possible, to consider shared services for all of our service areas, and also to take in consideration and to address the regulatory requirement and framework in which those services are provided by our department. I will start with transportation. And just the city manager and the finance director yesterday take you through in very detail the funding for general city services and described all of the general fund revenue and expenditure. I will just want to take a few minutes to focus today only just on transportation, and the reason is that you already heard yesterday and many times before presentation and discussion on the general fund funding, and also you had the opportunity to listen to our presentation, and you were part of the development of the 10-year financial plan for the water and sewer service area, and I am very certain that you are quite very familiar with the funding for those services, except maybe Council Member Salazar, which if I recall, was provided with a copy of the rate study, and I am sure that you had the chance to review those also. That's the only reason why I will focus only just on funding for transportation, and how you see from the type of funding which really funds this service, public service, you can see that at least for the last 2 years, the transportation is a special funding and is acting like a enterprise fund or a special fund service area. Based on Proposition 42, was established a mandatory minimum maintenance effort, which was a requirement of the Proposition 42 that each agency, in order for the agency to be eligible for that transportation funding, had to provide a minimum maintenance effort for transportation. And for San Bruno, that minimum maintenance effort is $491,000. And beginning last year, that was the allocation for transportation funding from general fund last year, and based on the direction given by the city manager, that was the basic assumption developing our this year budget for transportation also. The other, I will mention here that due to the statewide funding changes last year, how you are aware of, making the change from Proposition 42 fund to excise tax, that questioned the need to still maintain this requirement or not, that the local agencies will be mandated to provide this minimum general fund funding for transportation in order for them to maintain their eligibility for other transportation funding. This question wasn't really decided yet, and I cannot give you a final answer. I think this will be developed in time, the answer for that question. The intent, making those changes, the intent was to provide the same level of funding, and the assumption is that the same level of gas tax allocation and overall funding will come to the local agency. The main transportation funding is the gas tax and Measure A funds. The gas tax trend is a very sustainable, is a sustained level of funding, maybe slightly increasing through the year. Measure A, like any other sale tax-based funding, showed a decline in the last year, 2 years, and now you see a lower revenue than the revenue before. The difference is about 100,000 versus last year, if I recall right. Caltrans and SICANG funding, those are very stable, ongoing revenues for transportation. As you see, the total ongoing yearly revenue for transportation is about 2.4 million. Our street operational budget, how you have in front of you, is 1.2. That mean, if you can go back just a little bit more. Yes, thank you. It's a mistake, but I am sure you are figuring that out. But sounds good. I can tell you that only just the difference between the 2.4 to 1.2 will go for, that is basically your policy choice each year to make the difference between or how that funding will is allocated. What kind of other program is more important for the city, to the city to allocate those funds. Sidewalk program, traffic calming, street paving, rehabilitation. That's basically the revenue that you can play with. Also, as you see, based on our program funding for this year and based on the budget what you had in front of you, wasn't allocated the whole revenue. The revenue generated this year is not allocated entirely in this year budget, and our beginning balance, which was will be $622,000, will increase by the end of the year to 1 million. That really means 400,000 from this year revenue will not be spent, will be added to our program for the next year. And the main reason is that this year, which you don't see here, is the grant funding. And this is, I'm talking about ongoing revenue and what you can rely on ongoing sustainable yearly basis. And this year, the city was successful getting those federal funds for paving project, and reason why it's not our intent to use and to leave a bigger program, street resurfacing program for next year instead of spending that money and to program that money this year. Now, I will just mention that it's my intent to come back to you with a presentation of the pavement management program to make some recommendation on strategies. But based on our yearly revenue is here, how you see, without any grant at 2.4 level, but our yearly need only just to maintain our payment condition at the same level would be the recommended investment on yearly basis is 3.5 million based on the payment management as recommended by our consultant. I really don't have anything to add more for the funding. How our department then allocates the funding is based on different type of level of need. As you see, they are minimum service level, which are pretty much safety-related mandatory services, routine maintenance, urgent response, normal best management practice, and also some discretionary services. And this represents that 1.2 million in street operation, what you have included in your budget. I also, Jim, before the meeting, gave you these handouts, which basically includes much more details how this program area are really defined. and exactly is how much a certain outcome is cost in a year for us to achieve. And you can study that at your leisure, and if you have any question about it, certainly I can follow up with you with any answer. You have at the front, you have the response time for transportation, sewer, and water, and then you have the service, the outcome description, and the services provided. The next service what I will go to is our water
Excuse me,
services.
just for the public, what was the funding source for the Genevan project, Genevan Street project?
Was federal funding. That is the ERA phase 1 stimulus federal funding, and that's for Genevan, Parkway, and Crestwood. Those 3 roads will be paved using that federal funding.
Thank you.
Water services. I already mentioned in the beginning that this budget is entirely in line with the 10-year financial plan approved by you last year, and with the rate study and the rate what you already approved last year. And thank you very much for making the hard decision last year and making sure that our system is managed at a reasonable level. Our revenue is in line with the 10-year financial plan. As you see, is the water division operates with 17.3 FTEs. What I would like to emphasize for water services, that is a very specific regulatory environment managing the water system and providing drinking water to the city residents based on health and safety requirements. And it's imperative for us to meet managing the system at a acceptable level to meet those mandatory requirements. In the last year, since I am here, it's not that I brought this on the city by any means, but the department was lucky enough to have two audits from the Federal Highway Administration for our transportation projects, audit of our water system by the State Health Department, audit of our stormwater procedure by the regional board, and certainly you are aware of our collaboration with the regional water board on sewer-related issues. That each of our service areas during the last year were audited at least once. That's the reason why I am emphasizing this regulatory framework, which is very critical for us to consider developing our budget. Our water budget reflect the line. The only additional programs included in our proposal is to increase with $10,000 our toilet program, which was very, very popular, and the city ran out of the funds even by the mid of the year. And that's why is our recommendation to increase that program, water conservation program, with $10,000, and also to include a new program. It's called Cash for Grass. BASCA is just working on this program yet. The main intent is to provide financial incentive for the residents to change their landscape with drought-resistant native plants, and they will be incentivized in order for them to do that, up to, at least based on how is the discussion right now, up to $500 for each resident. Those are the only new programs or increased of existing program included in our budget. The department will face many challenges in water, mainly coordinating and with SFPUC on the conjunctive use project. Also, based on the BASCA negotiated new water contract, is a outstanding financial liability for all of the agencies that in the new contract was included a so-called interim water allocation by PUC, which PUC had the right to impose those interim water allocation and to develop those by the end of this year. Those possible impacts and consequences will be further considered by us, how those will become final. The wastewater enterprise fund was developed under the same basic assumption. The wastewater division operates with 14.5 FTE. I will emphasize also the regulatory environment in what kind of environment our system has to operate. Also stating that our sewer system is obvious that is not, at the present time, does not meet the regulatory requirement. Our sewer overflows are one of the highest statewide and in the region, and this will be very important for us to address that issue and to be able to move to a proactive maintenance. And you already made that decision, and you made that decision supporting us to be able to do it with the decision that you made last year. But still will be a high expectation to produce fast results, and in order for us to be able to produce fast results and to reduce the number of SSO, the department will need to implement a balanced approach with the long-term proactive approach and also the short-term proactive maintenance program to be able to lower the number of SSOs. Our budget proposal includes that approach. Is included that still based on the ongoing lawsuit with the baykeeper, that is a unknown liability in our proposed budget. It is our expectation that our budget will be able to accommodate whatever the outcome will be, but certainly I cannot state that with certainty. It will depend on the outcome of those discussions. the department will move on the development of our sewer master plan, and developing our sewer master plan. You will be engaged in the process, and the development of that master plan will give us even more certainty, hopefully, than what is the level of certainty now. On Stormwater Enterprise Fund, our total FTE is 3.5, 3.05. I'm correcting myself. And based on the new NPDES permit that really created a new regulatory environment, in what environment our stormwater services will need to be provided, anticipating the increased requirements is our recommendation and request to reallocate a 0.6 FTE from central garage, where is our recommendation. It was included in the city manager summary of FTE reduction to accommodate the financial challenges in the general fund. My recommendation to transfer that 0.6 FTE to the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, and to set the stage and enable us to be able to meet those new regulatory requirements. Is 2 FTE to manage the whole stormwater system. With 2 FTE, I am sure you can envision how challenging that can be and will be. You will hear, and that's the reason why I'm not spending more time on Stormwater Enterprise Fund, that as you recall, the department started to work on our stormwater master plan development last year, and is our expectation that in the next 4 months or 5 months, that master plan will move in the stage of finalizing and developing policy alternatives, and that will require more engagement on your part, including developing financial strategies addressing the long-term need of the stormwater, managing the stormwater water system. The last 2 services that I really want to mention is the solid waste, which I really don't have anything important to highlight, and the central garage, which I already mentioned in my comment about under stormwater, that considering the long-term strategy, reducing the number of equipment in our fleet and maximizing the efficiency of our fleet, was reasonable for us to reduce also the FTEs needed to manage that fleet. Reason why was the city manager proposed a reduction of 0.6 FTE from central garage. It is our expectation that reducing central garage FTE with 0.6 will have a impact on the services provided by central garage, on more the response time, how fast they will be able to address certain equipment failure, and will have a impact on response time. But it's not our expectation that we'll have any major impact, based on the fact that how I indicated our the size of the fleet also is reduced, and it's our expectation to be even further reduced. the last thing what I didn't mention in my discussion so far was our focus on shared services. And as you recall, was part of our budget, or you don't recall, but I will remind you anyhow. Last year was included in our budget strategy to contract our signal maintenance with South City and saving money and increasing level of services. That was a very, very successful project, and still our intent to maintain that strategy. Our level of service increased and also our cost decreased. The department is in ongoing discussions and meeting with South City and also the city of Millbrae to work on meaningful way how to share services or to maximize efficiency on basically each of our departments. Those discussions are not finalized yet. That's why you don't see anything specifically proposed here. But probably the next step with South City will be to jointly share certain traffic sign, to share our sign shop in many possible way. The city of San Bruno has the technical capability and the skill set to prepare and develop traffic signs. That capability is very limited more limited in South City, but they have higher number of FTEs or more resources available. And our discussion is now around how to emphasize our agency's strength, and then to combine and maybe to produce those signs here in San Bruno, and maybe South City employee will be able to install the sign if they have more FTEs. There are many, many other possible alternatives, ongoing discussions, sharing fleet services, both with Millbrae and South City. Looks very promising right now with Millbrae, that the city approached them before to help us with their sustainability services. They have a very strong staff, very strong expertise in sustainability area, and they were approached before if they would be willing to provide some kind of services to us. They were not open before, but now they are, the two departments, they are in discussion what that shared services would look like, or how would make sense, and how that would be possible. In the same time, the department focusing on all of the efficiency improvement. The green machine really, all of the commitments what the department made so far to you, those really came true and can be accounted for. The savings, time savings and money savings captured by the department buying the green machine, and also anxiously waiting for the striping machine, and all of those changes really will enhance the efficiency of the department, and the department will be able to provide the same level of service or as a result. But I think I already took too long. Instead of 10 minutes, I took almost 40 minutes, and I will stand for questions.
Question?
I'll help save the time that you went over on my end. And if I recall that example you talked about, working together with South City probably saved in that one example that you gave earlier. If Ken and I recall okay, that it was about almost a $25,000 savings
Correct.
to us, and a
Correct.
better service that's
Correct.
being provided.
Correct.
See? We're doing okay.
I recall.
You always do.
I was just gonna say, and I can pass on my written request to the finance director and the city manager, but, so we don't have to jump back and forth, I won't spend all this time. Under contractual services, community promotion, operating supplies, dues and membership, and publications and subscriptions, there are areas within various divisions, excuse me, that I have questions and want further things spelt out or explanations, but I'll do that. Like I said, I'll forward that information over to them when we get that disseminated later.
Irene, anything?
I just, with the Baykeeper lawsuit, do we know anything more? Have they given us, do we have a timeline about when they might tell us what's going on, or not them per se, but the resolution of the lawsuit?
They are ongoing discussion between our team and the Baykeeper teams, and I don't think any of us is able to give you a certain time frame when those discussions will be concluded. But certainly those are ongoing discussion right now.
Okay. And is there, I haven't seen the new agreement or the new permit, stormwater permit. I understand from CCAG presentations that it's tremendously more onerous than it was before and is going to be very costly for us. So I don't know if the council would like a brief overview of it. What happened before was with the storm drain, the county was allowed to have an overall permit for $10,000, so we all contributed a small amount and we got an overall permit. Now that's not going to be the case anymore, and the requirements for storm water runoff and what can be runoff are going to be much more rigorous, and we're going to have to do a lot of things. So I'd love to hear more about it, maybe some council meeting after the budget. And then I just want to comment on the work you guys did with the staff we have is remarkable. It's amazing how much you guys do. The other thing I want to commend you on is in this financially difficult times that you increase the budget, or proposing to increase the budget for the toilet and washing machine rebates. It's going to be very, very crucial that we conserve as much water as we can, and the rebates have been found to be extremely effective and efficient, so I'm glad we're doing that.
If I can just respond to your request, Councilmember O'Connor, was to address on stormwater MPDS new requirement. Our budget includes the short-term need for the short-term need to comply with the upcoming next year requirements. Will be our intent as part of the master plan discussion to really include and all of the programs which will need to be included in long term. And my recommendation would be to have that discussion as part of the master plan discussion for the stormwater.
Okay, thank you. I just want to know more, so.
Anything else? Michael? Ken? Okay. Cable TV.
Honorable Mayor and members of City Council, good evening. It is my privilege this evening to provide you with an overview of the Cable Television Department budgets. The Cable Television Department consists of 3 divisions, which are San Bruno Cable TV, the city's Cable Television Enterprise, San Bruno Cable Channel 1, the Local Origination Division, and the Technology Support Division and Internal Services Fund. The Cable Television Department operates with a staff of 23 full-time and 5 to 7 part-time temporary employees. Of the 23 full-time employees, 19 are in cable television, 1 in local origination, and 3 in technology support. The part-time temporary employees are in the local origination division. These part-time employees provide video production assistance on an as-needed basis as provided by Owen here this evening. The proposed cable television budget, as provided in your budget packet, is a summary of 3 budget segments. As shown in the slide, the first segment represents the budget for the established business operations of San Bruno Cable. In this section, we have captured the existing residential cable, internet, and phone service business, and the financial projections are based on the long-term trend in basic cable subscribers, the recently adopted rates for cable services, and the full recovery of actual operating costs. The second segment represents the budget for the new business or the commercial services operations. This segment captures the proposed revenue opportunities and anticipated expenditures of the commercial data and phone service business. It essentially is an updated section of the 5-year commercial services financial model that was presented to the City Council last year. The work program is to generate 300 new business phone accounts and 35 dedicated internet access accounts. And the third segment is a proposed direct sales or door-to-door marketing campaign budget. To my knowledge, if approved, this would be the first door-to-door campaign in our nearly 40-year history. As such, we are segmenting this activity to show both the revenue and expenditure impact on the cable fund. The plan is to generate approximately 3,500 new revenue-generating units, which also includes new customers. A revenue-generating unit is any standalone service that produces revenue, such as limited basic, digital basic, HD basic, internet, or phone. So in the event that we generate 500 triple play customers, that would account for 1,500 new revenue-generating units. So that's sort of the math. We have purposely segmented the budget into these 3 segments to not only provide the City Council with a better understanding of the various components of the proposed cable budget and the impact that each of these segments have on the enterprise fund balance, but also to enable the City Council to provide us with clear direction on the proposed work program. Also, should you direct staff not to pursue the direct sales campaign, the budget can be easily revised to reflect that direction. As the City Council is aware, the franchise fees and equity earnings transfer to the general fund are based on a percentage of revenues. So any deviation from the revenue projections will impact the income of the city's general fund. I think our revenue projections are conservative. While we could be highly successful and blow through our projections, we could also miss the mark. In the event we completely fail to deliver on the commercial services plan and the direct sales campaign, the adverse impact on the general fund based on these projections would be approximately $130,000. So that would represent the in the slide there. If you look at under commercial services and direct sales, there are the city taxes and fees, and the slide hasn't been changed, and the equity earnings transfer section. So if those components added up, the 10,681, the 37,600, 30,623, and the 50,000, it adds up to about $130,000. So those would not materialize if we don't meet the revenue projections as shown. Fiscal year 2009-10 has been a bittersweet year for San Bruno Cable. It has been a year of much progress and also of much decline. While we have successfully completed our commercial services project and have embarked on a path to provide data and phone services to the large, underserved business community, we have also experienced a loss of over 800 residential cable customers. I say large and underserved in describing the business community because, according to the finance director's presentation last night, there are 3,500 businesses that annually renew their business license with the city. And I say underserved because, unlike residents who can choose from San Bruno Cable, DirecTV, Dish Network, and AT&T, businesses are pretty much limited to AT&T. So our challenge in fiscal year 2010-11 will be to address both of these issues, to establish a system to grow the new business segment while simultaneously ensuring the continued subscriber growth and retention in our established cable business. And we need to achieve both of these priorities with continued focus on paring down the debt and deficit that has been accumulating since fiscal year 2007-8 from previous capital investments to ensure the future viability of the cable enterprise. As articulated by staff during the May 11th cable rate review presentation to City Council, one of the biggest challenges facing San Bruno Cable is the rising cost of programming. Despite a membership in the National Cable Television Cooperative, a purchasing organization representing some 1,000 independent cable companies, and our own efforts to negotiate the best rates, our programming costs have risen by almost 22% over the last 2 years. many networks whose long-term contracts with the NCTC had expired took the opportunity to reset their rates at much higher levels. And in the case of Showtime networks, since the NCTC could not reach an agreement with the network, San Bruno Cable had to contract directly with Showtime to maintain the existing level of services for our customers. And in the case of Comcast Sportsnet, the network split the RSN, or the regional Sportsnet, into two, and initially proposed to increase rates by as much as 160%. Today, after over a year of negotiations and filing of a program access complaint with the Federal Communications Commission, we're still being presented with a rate that is 100% more than what we were paying Comcast in 2008. Although a 60% reduction is good, we continue to negotiate with Comcast further. And during the Q&A section of the May 11th cable rate review presentation, Mayor Rain, you had asked whether the retransmission consent fees were reflected or captured in the proposed rate increase amounts. I would like to clarify today that the answer is both yes and no.
That clarifies.
Sharp.
It is yes, because we're able to strike all the retransmission consent deals by either bartering service for service or by trading value for value. By bartering service for service, I mean we exchange advertising time for retransmission consent. And by trading value for value, I mean we agree to carry a new channel offered by the station for retransmission consent. These costs are already absorbed in our rate structure, so they're reflected in the rates. The answer is also no, because we did not truly make an outright cash payment for the retransmission consent. Since there were no direct cash payments to broadcasters, a rate increase on the limited basic tier of service was not recommended by staff, as you recall. We have avoided paying cash payments to broadcasters for the current 3-year retransmission cycle, which ends in December 2011. Based on industry news, I'd like to take this opportunity not to alarm, but to forewarn the City Council that we may not be so lucky in the next retransmission consent cycle, unless there are some major changes in the law governing broadcast stations. There are 10 broadcast stations that elect retransmission consent during each cycle, and if each of them decides to charge 50 cents monthly license fee, we could be considering a $5 rate increase 18 months from now to cover such fees. So that is a possibility, depending on how we negotiate that. There's also a major shift underway in consumer behavior, as articulated by many industry experts. I heard speakers at recent industry conferences state that consumer behavior is changing from a lean back approach to a lean forward approach, where instead of leaning back in a lazy chair to watch a program, consumers are leaning forward for a more interactive experience. Consumers want to be part of the activity, to be able to comment on what they're viewing. With the availability of really fast internet service, a lot of video content is becoming available to consumers via the internet. And with more and more popular content becoming available over the internet, many consumers are switching for the new experience and to save money as well. Although much of the content is available online today for free, that may not be the case in the future. The industry response to this shift in consumer behavior is resulting in continued evolution in product and services. The mantra today is TV everywhere. Cable companies are making progress in bringing the video experience to every device, anywhere, at any time. Technology is available today where 4 to 6 programs can be recorded simultaneously on a central recording device and then shared or played back on all different TV sets that are connected to that recording device. There's technology being developed that enables the remote controlling of a DVR through mobile devices such as IP phones, iPhones, and Google phones, etc. This technology will allow you to set a recording of a program or viewing of a recording of a program over a mobile device. Technology is being developed that will enable you to begin watching a program at home, pause it, and then continue watching it in a mobile device located, say, in your minivan.
That's scary.
Especially for little kids, like they want to watch a show and then the parents need to go somewhere and they can continue watching it in the minivan. So it's very interesting.
No thanks.
Yeah. For these technologies to really take off, faster and faster internet speeds and ubiquitous wireless broadband coverage is needed. Cable companies are deploying DOCSIS 3.0 service for faster internet service and are also partnering with 3G and 4G WiMAX service providers to expand their service footprint and enable these new technologies for their customers. Cable companies are also beginning to create web portals for online content to retain video subscribers, to retain video subscriptions. and 3D content is also right around the corner. Currently, ESPN is the only cable network with a 3D product, and Discovery Networks is right on its heel with a product launch sometime next year.
So are we all gonna have chips on our shoulder pretty soon?
Be wearing glasses to watch TV,
Oh.
so that's, yeah, pretty close. In our case, we have kept up with every key industry initiative and have met customer demands for new services to ensure the long-term viability of the cable enterprise. We cost-effectively met FCC mandates and reclaimed bandwidth for expansion of product and services by converting to an all-digital system. As a result of this conversion, we have been able to offer over 150 new channels over the last 2 years. We're also utilizing the reclaimed bandwidth to provide DOCSIS 3.0 internet service of up to 100 megabits per second coming up in July. We diversified our product mix to include digital phone service, and today we provide residential phone service to over 900 customers. We upgraded our infrastructure to further expand our product mix to include commercial services. Today we are positioned to provide business phone and dedicated internet circuits of any capacity to local businesses. We are currently in the process of demoing a multi-room centralized DVR or recording solution for our customers. We're also working with ESPN to get the ESPN3.com online content on our website as well. As Council is aware, San Bruno Cable has been experiencing a steady decline in cable subscribers over the last decade at a rate of about 250 per year due to a variety of reasons, including increase in competition and lack of programming. However, the subscriber losses were most significant last year as a result of AT&T's stepped-up door-to-door marketing campaign, the loss of highly desired programming such as Univision Oakland A's due to contract negotiations, and customers dropping cable and switching to online content with Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, Hulu, and a lot of other content providers that are online, and a string of system outages at the most inopportune times. To address the system outages, we will be proposing the replacement of equipment that failed with one that has built-in redundancy through the CIP program that will be presented later. To address the competitive pressure, we're proposing the door-to-door campaign. The economy has caused a lot of people to relocate to and from San Bruno, so many of the new residents are not familiar with San Bruno Cable. So a door-to-door campaign may be an effective tool to get to the customer first. The other good thing about this campaign is that it is commission-based, so we incur costs only when there is a sale. Despite these subscriber losses, San Bruno Cable has a subscriber penetration of 56.6% today compared to the industry rate of 49.3%. So we're still ahead of the industry curve in terms of retaining our customers and maintaining a higher penetration to households. So in summary, for the cable operations, we continue to remain focused on growing the business, delivering excellent customer service despite the 6 furlough days that we're taking, and ensuring the future viability of the cable enterprise through deployment of new technology and a product diversification strategy, and continued pursuit of our product diversification strategy. If we stick to the 5-year financial model developed last year, we'll eliminate our debt by 2012 and the fund deficit by 2014. That concludes my presentation on the cable side and talking about the local origination. The only significant change to the local origination budget is the addition of 3 new cameras and control equipment for airing city council meetings. We received numerous comments from citizens about the quality of video of the city council meetings. So to address this issue, we're recommending the purchase of 3 of these cameras. Other than that, Channel 1 will continue to expand local programming, See the Moments, and the kids' story time as well.
Terrence, excuse me, why don't we just see if the council has any questions
Sure.
on the cable portion presentation?
Yeah. On the marketing campaign, $224,000 door-to-door sales, can you expand a little bit on how that's going to work and how many revenue-generating units it's going to take to break even on that investment?
Okay. The way the door-to-door sales is conducted is basically the door-to-door vendor will have about 4 people a sales force of 4, and what they'll do is they'll attack the community, or approach the community from 4 different quadrants and
Encourage might be a nicer word. Encourage the community.
to encourage the community. So basically, the strategy will be to approach it from the 4 different. Each will be assigned their own specific areas, and they will make several different passes throughout the community, maybe 4 times before they're done with their sales, because of customers being home or not being home, etc. And the way we pay, the commission structure is based on actually completing a sale. In this case, normally the door-to-door contractors require at least 3 times the amount of the revenue that they generate. So, for example, if they make a sale that is $50 for a service, then they require us to pay $150 as a commission, 3 times the amount. The discussions that we've had so far have knocked it back down to 2 times revenue. And what we'll be doing is we'll be using that extra piece to provide incentive to customer as a free period, so to allow that as well. So those are some of the different strategies that we're pursuing in terms of establishing the cost or the rate for the commission rate. In terms of what we intend to generate is that, given the fact that AT&T has actually stepped up a campaign already in our community where they're going out and doing a lot of door-to-door activity. They're getting to a lot of the customers first. Like as I mentioned, a lot of the customers are moving into the community. They're new. They're not aware of San Bruno Cable, and one of the things is that since we only provide services in San Bruno, we're very limited in terms of how we can market our product and services. What we use today is bill messages, bill inserts, direct mail pieces. We use our own channels, cross-channel promotions. And then when you use direct mail piece and send it to all households, the effectiveness of direct mail piece is so limited that you send to 100% of the customers, maybe 80% of them just throw it away, 20% might just look at it, and then out of that, maybe even 2% might actually do something about it. So it's not the most effective tool. It's good in getting messages out, but in terms of generating activity, it's very not highly successful. So door-to-door campaign, actually, we're there. Somebody's right there talking about a product, and we think that it's going to be a lot more effective. It's highly used by the industry, and we think that's going to generate additional traction. So that's some of the ways we're going to pursue it. In terms of the number of sales we intend to generate, we're looking at about 3,500. The contractor we're talking to, they said they can generate about 50 sales a week. So we've conservatively estimated about 3,500 sales. So essentially, they'll be pursuing not only new customers and selling packages to those customers, but also hitting or visiting existing customers and offering them about upgrading them to additional services as well. So that's sort of the program and the plan.
Okay. And so then the program would continue until the money was gone, or is
exactly? Yeah. It would essentially money would be gone. I mean, that would be really a success in my opinion, that we've actually achieved that activity. So that's what we're hoping for.
If I could add to that, just to clarify for the council member's question, the only direct expense of the program is an expense that would be incurred however we got a new subscriber if we need to purchase additional set-top boxes in order to accommodate the customer volume. So if you could switch back to the slide that shows the costs, it's intended, as the director indicated, as an anticipated revenue, as opposed to the bottom line there is the $169,000 is the cost of the number of new boxes that would need, the amount of the new box cost that would be necessary to serve the number of customers that the revenue would indicate.
And
Is that what I just confused
I
you?
think I'm just, yeah.
so the point is, in order to generate these new customers, say for example, if we bring in a new customer that is a triple play customer, we would need to still provide that customer with 2 set-top boxes. If it's a HD, we'd have to provide him with an HD box. If it's an internet customer, we'd have to provide him with a cable modem. So there are equipment involved in that. So that portion of that capital expenditure is shown in that column, under the direct sales column, under that last section right there. The other thing that we should remember is that despite the fact that there is a negative impact in the current year, the year of the campaign, these customers, once they're on, they'll be there with us in the subsequent years as well. So that in the subsequent year, there's not a equipment cost anymore. there's not a commission cost anymore. Essentially, their programming cost and customer support costs associated with it, but those capital costs and acquisition costs are eliminated in the second year. So they end up producing additional revenues for the city and additional net cash flow for the city in the subsequent years. So at the rate that if you're churning at a rate of 2.5% every year, we continue to maintain a large base of the subscribers.
Assuming that you have the customer loyalty that'll keep them around.
Exactly. I mean, that's really dependent upon just the whole industry and the way things are changing. So given that, I think it's more imperative that we continue to pursue something like this, so we're continuously in front of the customer and generating that kind of activity. And for many years, our marketing budget has been very minuscule. It's been $50,000 on a $10 million budget, which is hardly anything. So we need to really expand that if we're going to continue to push that forward.
Tenzin, and maybe to staff in general, when someone, you said people, leave the city and come into the city. So what's the first thing they do when they come in? They probably go down and sign up for water, I guess. Do we have like a welcome package that includes information from the chamber, cable and stuff, or do they have to get directed to go to El Camino, or is there something that they get? Like I said, welcome to San Bruno, here you are, and these are the services we provide, to head it off, so you're not trying to catch up with them later.
Absolutely. I think we have in the past provided our brochures to the finance department, and we also provided chamber as well, as business managers indicated. So we continue to do that, and I think we need to step that up
Right.
given the environment, and we'll continue to work with finance to get not only the residential customer movement,
Right.
but also the business movement as well. So those are
big
two
for
things
the
that we
business
look
moves.
at. Absolutely.
Okay.
Mayor.
Ken?
It's interesting you say that your marketing budget has been small in recent past years, but from what my experience is that cable was present at many community events. Steve Furbo, that's how everyone knows Steve Furbo. Maybe there's fewer events now, but I think it's great to go door to door. But when you're out there, you're at events like maybe the Posey Parade coming up. I know cable's out there, but the product's not being. If you set up and we've seen you at many events where you've had the tent and you've had the TV and people can see what the product is. And I think that's the thing and I think you got the corner of the market here because you could go. We're mobile. We can go to certain things and not necessarily have to have a public event. Maybe go to a empty storefront or something and grab people in, grab our residents that are shopping at Bay Hill or going to a certain place, and just have a day where I remember you used to give stuff away all the time. I think we need to go back to what was the success 10, 15 years ago, whatever, when we were building up subscribers plus raking in revenue for that new for that whole rebuild and stuff. So I think those are the things. Those were successful in the day. People like free stuff, but people also like to see what the product is instead of reading all of these, and it can get really confusing. 1 tier, 3 tier, all this stuff, and I don't know. I like to, and for me, it's flicking the channels and see what's available, and that's probably the best thing.
Certainly, we can look at pursuing that further. Yeah. One more.
Go.
Through the chair, to go on what a couple of them just said, when with this door-to-door campaign do you foresee, if the budget's approved, when that would?
We're beginning July 1.
Okay.
At the beginning of the year fiscal year.
The other thing, to piggyback on what Councilmember Ibarra said, I think I would go back to the old days too, when I worked for the City Parks and Rec. There was just known. It was everywhere. The banners at the sporting events, the participation in every civic group, which I think had loyalty by those that participated, that volunteered in those programs and activity. Whether it was the sports league, the schools, I'm not saying that's not done, but I don't think that it has the flavor, and I don't think it has the exposure that it did. And I think when they perceive or believe that this industry, the municipal, local cable, is giving back to the community and provides services and funds to promote and inspire youth to participate in leagues, have tournaments, I think you build loyalty that way. This is a town that talks. This is a town that will support each other. And I think that also needs to be promoted, more than just door to door. Because you're right, AT&T with the phone calls and the mailers and the door-to-door, it is a very aggressive campaign. And there are people switching, more and more, hundreds that we're losing. And I think we have to maybe go back to basics. Think back to what made us thrive and successful and what brought pride to this community. And I think those are some of the things that we need to promote. I also want to comment because I opened up a letter from San Bruno Cable, and it was from the business manager, Steve Firpo. I thought it was a bill, but I thought it was too soon, so I was glad it wasn't. But I want to commend and compliment that letter that tried to, though uncomfortable as it may be about the increase, it actually communicated that to the subscriber. It wasn't trying to hide it in the bill and get all the phone calls later. It was right there letting you know why it was done, what's going to happen, and who they can contact in case they needed further information or had concerns regarding the increase. I think that's proactive. I think that's a benefit. I think it's communication, and I think they want that type of a service level. With this promotion of door-to-door, I wonder, can we handle if we receive all these additional calls and boxes and needs that we have and installations? Are we prepared at the current staffing level? Because my concern would be you meet your goal and surpass your goal, and then we're bottlenecked, and all of a sudden we can't provide the service that we've gone door to door to promote. And that's a major concern for me.
What I'd like to express to you is that when I came on board 7 years ago, and today we're maintaining the same level of staffing that we had 7 years ago. We haven't increased a single extra body, except we added one additional warehouse clerk position. So I want to emphasize that each and every cable employee is working tremendously hard in terms of, when you look at our subscriber, the products that we offer today, and the amount of work that has been accomplished over the time frame. We have made significant amount of progress, and we work tirelessly to ensure that we deliver the best service to our customers. So from that perspective, I think we are on point, and we continue to focus on that. I think we can continue to improve our visibility in the community, as Councilmember Medina said. I appreciate your comments on the letter that was developed by the staff regarding the rate increase. I think that helped alleviate a lot of the burden on our front-end office employees as well. So the fact of the matter is, that's sort of where the industry is going. That's sort of the situation we're in. And I think we're doing the best work we can. And, I truly believe that, we can do so many things more, but, we'll continue to focus, as you said, but there's only limited amount of time in the day, and there's only limited amount of resources. And I think we're pushing our employees to a large extent. If you look at our own counterparts in the public sector, I would say, in the private sector, I would say that a lot of the people in similar positions would actually have received better compensation, would have received bonuses, would have received promotions, etc. That a lot of the public sector employees don't really see. In fact, we're working with a 6-day work furlough at the current situation, and we also want to continue to expand the providing customer services and be 24 hours and that kind of stuff. So from that perspective, if there's additional funding, etc., we can look at those and continue to do it and promote and grow that. But we're all working in constrained economic times, constrained budgets, and we're trying to do the most amount of work cost effectively, cost efficiently, and we continue to focus on that aspect of it. So we'll go back and we'll continue to work harder in terms of delivering the vision of the City Council, in terms of getting greater visibility for our community, for our service, etc. And we'll continue to focus on the work program as outlined in the budget.
Please, Chair, I want to follow something up that you said. It is true that decades ago, when Leo started that operations, and that building was dedicated on El Camino, which I was there for that, it has evolved in the technology and what has had to be endured by staff and learned by staff in a short period of time. And that's why when I always reference about the service level, it is not a reflection upon the staff that we have and the diligent job that they do. It is to know and wonder if we are giving the resources that are necessary in order to be competitive in today's market. Because there is only so much you can ask of someone. There's only so many new things you can have them do and still do what they're doing in addition to what we just asked them to do. So that's why I always pose those questions. I know what the staff does, and I know that they do the best job they know how with the resources that they are given at their disposal currently in order to provide the best opportunity and service to the community. But that's why I want us to have a hard look and really a gut check whether we are doing what we need to do in order to be competitive.
Absolutely. I think with the budget that we presented you with actually encompasses that. I mean, we've gone through our process and have developed a budget that reflects that activity. As you know, I mean, when we went through the rate increase presentation, it was a challenge. I mean, we want to keep our rates low. We want to try to continue providing but costs are going up, and we can't really do anything about it. So, just recognizing those things, the budget that we presented actually is assuming a lot of work on our part to achieve the vision. So, I mean, I could come back and say we'd like to see, expansion in salaries, expansion and that, but I think what we're trying to say to you today is that the budget that we have in front of you reflects that we're taking up on ourselves to meet and deliver on the standards that you expect us to do. So, I hope that is a satisfactory answer to what you're.
Thanks.
Anything else? All right. Keep going. Don't you have something else?
Don't you have?
Did you finish?
Oh, yes, sorry, I do.
I didn't mean to scare you away.
No, absolutely not. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. The last section that I would like to talk to you about is the technology support division. Essentially, the operating expenditures for that division is relatively flat, actually down about $15,000 over last year. A few of our notable accomplishments this year included the upgrade of the city's core data network infrastructure to enable deployment of IP telephony, and the retirement of the Mitel PBX system and deployment of the Cisco IP telephony system, and also the conversion of the city's telephone service to San Bruno Cable, where we're paying ourselves for the service. We also began posting the city council meetings on YouTube, online on the website. For 2010-11, our more notable work effort will be to complete the disaster recovery project that we talked about last night. And we'll also be upgrading our Microsoft Office Suite applications to Office 2010. So that would be the next iteration of the Office application. So those are the things that we'll be pursuing next year in the Technology Support Division.
Through the chair?
Sure.
Much simpler. Just going back to what was brought up last evening about continuing to have a backup system in place, that we had $30,000 allocated to complete that task. We stopped that due to budgetary constraints, and I believe that was again to have it stored over at police facility, police plaza. And that's again, of course, if anything happens here, which is earthquake or whatever could happen. You were saying that is being, I just want to clarify from last night, you were saying that is being looked into for next year?
Yes.
Or when you say next year, you mean 2011, 2012, or we
2010-11, in the upcoming year, exactly, in the upcoming
All right,
year.
to complete that task and have that backup system in case of
Exactly, I think it'll be part of the CIP presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Tenzin?
One
Michael.
comment to follow up on Councilman Medina's comment. Have you considered using another municipality's data center as the DR site? I mean, is that something that could be incorporated? I mean, if we have a mutual agreement where we have essentially duplicate equipment at another municipality, if we were to go down, we could resume operations. Not only protect our data, but actually resume operations from another.
Actually, you raise a great point about co-locating away from our own city, which is a great thing. That's what originally what I elected to do, what I like to do. But again, to get to another location, again, there's a cost associated with it. What we can do is, now the fact that we have a presence at the Carrier Hotel, where we have a co-location facility there, that could also be one of the locations where we could house our disaster recovery equipment.
Tenzin, maybe you should explain the hotel.
Absolutely. A Carrier Hotel is a.
That hotel,
Yeah.
Not the one you're thinking about. It's another hotel.
It's really a place where all the major telecarriers co-locate their facilities in one location.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, you better get out of there before somebody takes us. Thank you very much, Dennis. Okay, we're gonna have a little talk on redevelopment.
We are, and I'm going to start. The director will provide a little bit of additional information, and then I will ask the community development director to talk to you about operational initiatives. As the council is aware, the redevelopment agency operates in two different funds. First is the redevelopment operations fund. That is representative of 80% of the tax increment collected in each year. That amount is unrestricted, except it is dedicated by law to redevelopment purposes. And again, the director will talk in a moment about operational programs that are envisioned for the coming year. The low and moderate income housing fund is a specially dedicated set-aside of 20% of gross tax increment revenues. Those revenues are restricted under state law for the provision of affordable housing, and by that, the definition is housing that is affordable to low and moderate income households. As you see, there is a staffing allocation that is funded through redevelopment expenditures. These amounts actually in aggregate represent only one dedicated full-time equivalent individual who is fully funded through the redevelopment agency, that is our redevelopment and housing manager. And the remainder of the staffing for the redevelopment operations and housing programs is a conglomerate, I guess, of portions of individual staff persons' time.
Nine-headed?
Something like that, yeah. I would just call out for the council's information that the estimated revenues shown in the budget this year, totaling $7.3 million, is the gross tax increment revenue anticipated to be received by the agency. That amount then, as the council is also aware, goes first and foremost to the housing set-aside fund at the 20% level, and then is divided essentially 50-50 by the agency itself and the other taxing entities with whom we have pass-through agreements. So there is actually a much smaller amount that ends up being available for day-to-day operations. The one thing I would point out, and then I'd ask the director to talk to you, finance director to talk to you for a moment about the fund balance. You notice an item on the expenditure line there called SERAF. That $1.9 million is the amount that we had to write a check this year for as part of the state's grand plan to take money from municipal entities to fund the state's budget crisis. It's a very large number, and one which we obviously reluctantly paid. That amount was not budgeted last year in an abundance of optimism that the litigation initiated by the California Redevelopment Association would in fact be successful, and we would not actually end up having to pay what was threatened at the beginning of the fiscal year last year. So unfortunately, in abundance of caution, you see further down the page here, we have in fact this year budgeted nearly $410,000, which is the second year of the supplemental ERAF take by the state that is anticipated, and at this point I would say shows little promise of being relieved during this coming year.
It's still being litigated.
I believe it's still being litigated, but there's an appeal pending. There was already a decision that came down at the beginning of May, which precipitated the actual payment of the $1.9 million. Up until that point, we were actually, I was very optimistic that CRA's lawsuit would actually prevail, because approximately 1 year ago, a similar issue was litigated, and in fact, payments were not made because the court at that time found in favor of redevelopment agencies. So that is an issue that remains in flux. Frankly, I call it out really only to identify a difference in our budget procedure this year. Last year not budgeted, this year is budgeted. But more to the point, although this is identified as a 2-year plan by the state at the current time, having done it and had it upheld and doing it again, in my view, leaves the door pretty wide open to the checkbook that, given that the state's budget crisis shows no immediate sign of abating or being eliminated. So I can't predict the future, but I have a fair amount of concern about whether we and other redevelopment agencies are going to be able actually to legitimately hang on to those resources that were identified in state redevelopment law and programs that were established by that law for the purposes, whether we're going to be able to fulfill the mandate, essentially, of redevelopment. And I guess I would say at this point that remains pretty vividly an open question.
Thank you, Connie. Yes, so in looking at the fund summary before you, I think it's important to add to the city manager's comments that while there are resources, if we look to next year and the expected revenues that we are looking for from tax increments, there is that $410,000 second installment for CRAP, as we call them, and that money obviously reduces the capacity that we have to take on redevelopment initiatives, and the director will talk more about the transit corridors plans there, but this slide really just hopefully puts into perspective the availability of resources that may be subject to, again, future state takes that may happen down the road. There is a bright note in the sense that given the redevelopment that has taken place, and specifically with the SNK project, we do expect some growth in tax increment revenues, although, again, somewhat mitigated if there are future state takes down the road. Another item I want to point out is in terms of the estimated revenues that you see, the 7.378, that's actually $300,000 higher than what is in your budget book. We've actually found out through our property tax auditing consultants that there were certain properties that were actually located in redevelopment areas in which we were not paid tax increment money. So these were found monies that are added into the current year's budget. So that actually helps reduce the current expected funding deficit or fund balance deficit at the end of this current fiscal year, that being the $215,000 number. But again, going forward, absent, notwithstanding any additional takes from the states, there are sufficient resources potentially to go forward with some of these initiatives. And again, the caution is that we still don't know what the challenges are with the state. Obviously, $20 billion is still what they're looking at in terms of balancing the next year's budget. And knowing what the state has historically done, that could be debated for months into the new fiscal year before they come up with a decision.
Question: the 952 that you show projected estimated fund balance, that's after all of the pass-throughs and everything, right?
That is correct. This is net of all the expenditures, which is including
Right.
the pass-throughs.
Right, okay. Questions?
The pass-throughs are not reduced at all. That's taken, that percentage is full, and all of the intergovernmental agencies that get those pass-throughs get their full amount.
That is correct.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned the pass-throughs is that in previous years, the council may recall a comment from the auditors in the audit report that we received most recently, that rather than budgeting on a net basis after pass-throughs, showing revenues and expenditures after pass-throughs, that in fact we should be showing in the budget the revenues, gross revenues, and then the expenditure for pass-throughs, leading to a net amount at the bottom of the page. And that was really the only reason for mentioning it. So when you look and you see a $6.6 million or a $5.4 million expenditure in redevelopment, that is a much higher number than you've seen before, because it includes the very large amount of pass-through payments.
Thank you, and good evening. As the council knows, the primary planning document that we're working on now is the Transit Corridor Plan. And what the Transit Corridor Plan is doing is taking a look at land use within the area of our downtown where the new Caltrain station is, specifically San Mateo Avenue from about El Camino up to the 380, San Bruno Avenue from around Cherry down to 101, and El Camino from around Crystal Springs back again to the 380. And any good specific plan really does two things. Number one, it works with the community to create a vision, and in ours we have a series of community workshops where over 100 residents have participated to create this vision. We've also formed a steering committee with 17 members of our community, from the business community to residents to other people within the community, to help direct that. And once you create that vision, you work through a process to create the policies, to create the guidelines, and to create the regulations that will direct you towards implementing that, so that when developers come in, they know that they'll be able to build a project which will be able to be built. We're also, as you notice, an environmental impact report for this transit corridor plan is budgeted within the redevelopment budget. And what this will do is the developers will know that they will be able to get environmental clearance for their projects. What we can also do is work in a reimbursement clause into this, so that they'll end up paying for that environmental review in the long run on a proportional basis. But a lot of developers do want to know that they'll be able to have a clear path, and that the vision the city has already created is there. The second thing that you need to do with redevelopment funds is create the infrastructure that will encourage private investment to occur. If a developer knows that they're going to come in, but they don't have the sidewalks, they don't have the street network, they don't have the sewer or wastewater capacity in order to support their development, they're not going to build, and you're not going to realize additional tax increment and additional growing property tax base in the future, because you didn't have the infrastructure to support those developments in the first place. So what the successful transit corridor plan will do is really outline our strategies for infrastructure spending, so that we can support this private development in the future. The second thing that your agency could do is help leverage private funds. And the way that you leverage private funds, or ways that has been done by other cities, is either partnering with private developers, acquiring property that could help development occur. You know, we have a lot of smaller parcels within San Bruno, and what other agencies have done is help take those smaller parcels and merge them together to create larger development parcels for future development. Some smaller programs that we have budgeted in here and that are mentioned within the transit corridor are possibly expanding our facade improvement program so it reaches more people, including architectural services as part of the facade improvement plan. So that's on a smaller scale. But to really, in order to make this happen, and why the state takeaways are so important, are, you know, in the long run, most successful redevelopment agencies do issue debt. They do issue bonds, so that they could do a lot of the infrastructure type improvements, the property acquisition type improvements in the beginning to support development through for the length of the plan. So what we would propose is that in the near future, that we do have a council study session or redevelopment agency study session to really hone in on some of the policies that we came up with in the 5-year implementation plan that could help direct spending within the agency, knowing what we know now as the transit corridor plan is going along. In terms of where we're at in the transit corridor plan process, the draft plan is being reviewed by staff and has been sent back to the consultants to make a few minor changes, and will be released to the steering committee and to the public very soon. I'd say within the next 4 to 5 weeks. So we're moving along. We are, I believe it's really going to be a successful plan, and we have a lot of people watching this, developers, as well as other cities within San Mateo County, knowing that we are headed in the right track within our redevelopment area. So I could take any questions at this time.
Through the chair, I want to go back to something maybe you can help guide me a little bit. We talked about the transit corridor, of course, which is very important, and potentially partnering bond acquisition. And I'm not going to go into great detail, but there's a piece of property that I talked about, I'll be very open with it, about acquiring. It's something on a corner about, I don't know, San Bruno Avenue
corner?
in Huntington. Used to be a bank, but I don't want to mention exactly. What is the possibility of something that I think I personally am tired of looking at, that I believe most of the members of our community are, maybe most of my colleagues are? What could we really do proactively with the transit corridor and all that's evolving, or the partnership that you've outlined? Give me an example or a thought that we could do in order to improve that area in light of all that's going on.
Well, we could go into the specific details later, but what other agencies have done. What we have right now, one thing that the state takeaways are not touching are the housing set-aside funds within our agency. And we have collected, we're up to about $2.5 million right now in set-aside funds that could be used for something like property acquisition or partnering with a nonprofit housing developer to develop a mixed-use type project on a parcel that's near a train station. We also could leverage.
It wouldn't have to all be housing?
No, it wouldn't have to be all be housing. No, no. Your contribution using set-aside funds would have to go towards the development of that housing, but the entire development would not have to be. And in fact, I think a strong argument could be made. You really do need to create the retail environment to support housing within those areas. So, a strategic mixed-use development would probably be the right idea. We also have in lieu fee funds. As you know, we've had a lot of single-family developments up in the hills. Over the last 5-year period, we've accumulated about $2.7 million of in lieu fee funds as well. So, you could do a combination of using set-aside funds as well as in lieu fee funds to fund something like that.
And I appreciate that. We don't need to go more detail. I just think that has become a situation to where if you want to categorize something as blight, I think it's reaching there. If it's about the property owner not being as cooperative or working within the community, I think we're there. And I think obviously by what it looks like and how long it's been vacant, I think it's very apparent. I think what redevelopment was designed for, and in this aspect of property acquisition, I think it's something that's fair and that I think would only better the community.
If I can also add to that, it's like 15 years ago, this city adopted that specific plan at that was known as the crossings, and we had this whole city, the city staff and the city council had a part as a redevelopment agency to dictate what we wanted there, and we're still building on it, and it's been successful, and we've gotten accolades and things, and it's helped our community. What I don't want is, I realize the transit corridor plan is going to be fairly specific and laid out and things, and then I get this impression that we're going to sit back and wait for the developers to come and start knocking on the door and make proposals. I think we need to also, we want to be proactive. We're sitting here, we've promoted the transit corridor plan with staff's help and the redevelopment agency. We want to say, okay, let's move forward on a mixed-use development at this site. Let's see what can be done here. let's start instigating, things, so that it gets out there and that that the developers say, hey, geez, they want to promote it now. We're not just having to go out snooping around where, what's good. The economy's going to turn around, and we should be very ready and well positioned to do it. We have a lot of projects that are waiting. We have great projects that if they were to get built, if they were built when they said that they want to get built, we'd have some very nice developments. We have some nice developments, but we have those blighted areas. We have those vacant buildings that, for the most part, have a design. They have a plan, and so we need to look at that. We need to look at things along El Camino, and be a little more aggressive in saying this is what we'd like here. This is what we need here. And I look forward to that study session or to that meeting and that group talk where we say this area here, when we're not afraid to say this needs to change, this corner needs to change, because there's a train station that's coming. There's a great separation that's coming, and that whole area of the city is going to change, and we need to be ready.
It's time.
Yeah. No, and on your comment, I think that's exactly why redevelopment agencies were created. I mean, you made the findings that it's a blighted area and that an extra effort is needed in order to create development in that area. And I think that's the extra. I mean, the biggest failure in planning is implementation. It's not in creation of the plan. So I think you really nailed it, that once we approve this plan that creates a great vision, that creates all these policies, that you really do need to implement it and be proactive in implementation.
I fully appreciate, I'm grateful that staff, went with this transit corridor plan. We didn't think it up. This is something that you and the city staff felt that was necessary, and that we went through all the procedures and we talked and talked and talked. Now the plan is going to be, it's going to be ready and ready to be followed, and it's great. So we can't sit on our hands and feel sorry for ourselves because it's a bad economy. I think things are ready to happen.
So there.
Thank you, Aaron. And I think we're just going to have a comment on equipment reserve before we close out.
Right, the director will provide an overview of the equipment reserve in all funds. As the council is aware, there is a separate equipment reserve for general fund funded costs, and each of the enterprise funds also covers the cost of items that need to be replaced. So we'll just go through those quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so this is actually a recap of what's on page 257 and 258 of your budget document there. I believe the chief alluded to the fire apparatus yesterday.
Yeah, you slipped that one in.
Right.
Yes.
He said 540 though.
Yeah, fine.
Yes, so that needs to be updated to reflect that amount.
Wow. Maybe he needs to.
And it's going to be captured in the next slide in terms of what resources we have available to pay for these replacements. Over and above that, he also has a request for the Ford Expedition, and that was again in recalling the conversation that we had yesterday. He is going to be postponing this $50,000 to a future year. So, item number one, we need to increase. Item number two, we're going to basically strike out for the Ford Expedition replacements.
Through the chair, and I'm trying to thumb through here. Is that a carryover from before, or was that new? Was the Ford Expedition thought to be replaced in
Previous year.
09, 010, 210? So it is a carryover.
That's correct.
And so we're feeling that apparatus can stand another year. How many years? How old is it? What is the normal cycle in which it's usually replaced?
I want to say the Expedition's a 2000. It's typically a 7-year replacement cycle. We deferred last year, feeling that the mileage was medium, so we were willing to defer it last year. This year, I'm looking at planning to share a vehicle with the city of Millbrae for a command vehicle, and using this as a reserve for out-of-county responses and so forth.
So you figure it's about 10 years, it's about a 7-year normal
No,
replacement
yeah.
time frame? But you feel very comfortable and confident that this, by us postponing it for 1 year, is not going to cause any harm or
No, it's got about
lack of service?
47,000 miles. I think we're okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Actually, in terms of the age of the vehicle, I think it is a year 2000 vehicle, as indicated on the budget document there. The other item for fire in terms of capital replacement are the radios. This is grant funded, or the majority of this is grant funded. The city's share is the $5,000. So moving on to the next department, that being police, this is the replacement of the second parking enforcement vehicle. One was done already, so again, this is actually a carry forward of a replacement that we're scheduling for the upcoming year. And the last item for the police department is the replacement of their copier. Moving on to the public services departments, the request is to replace a vehicle currently it's a Ford Explorer, but I think what we're going to look for is an environmentally, thank you.
Hybrid.
Yes, environmentally friendly vehicle as a replacement for what currently is a Ford Explorer. Next slide, please. And then for the Public Services Streets Department, we have a larger piece of equipment, that being a cab and chassis, which is a dump truck for a value of $38,000. So the next two items in terms of replacement are not out of the general fund, replacement reserve fund, but these are actually coming out of the enterprise funds because these are assets in the respective enterprise funds. That is the water enterprise fund and the wastewater enterprise funds. And those are for the water enterprise fund, a water truck, services truck, and then for the wastewater enterprise fund, it's a combination of a factor jetter unit. And obviously that second item is a very large ticket item for that department.
Is that a replacement or in
Yeah,
addition?
I remember when we bought the Vector.
Yeah.
It's a
Replacement.
replacement. It's a replacement.
Okay.
We did, I believe, last year or the year before, purchase a second smaller jetter. So we do operate two in the department, but this is a replacement of, I think, the larger one. Is that correct?
It is smaller one, with more functional.
Have we shared those occasionally with other municipalities?
Not yet, as part of the discussion that was passed. There's no, it's not shared.
Okay.
So why does the larger Vector need to be replaced?
Could you?
Yeah, it's a big.
It's up for replacement.
Sorry, just to clarify, it's not large.
Yes.
Is it the larger one that's being replaced, the first one we bought?
The big one?
No.
No.
Which one?
This is the jet.
We're confusing ourselves even. The department operates a Vector. The wastewater division operates a Vector.
Right.
It also operates a jetter/flusher. The Vector flushes and sucks. The jetter flusher just flushes. So with the Vector jetter combination,
We have a zipper too, right?
We have a zipper. And a rotter. So we are going to replace the flusher jetter, which only flushes, with a smaller Vector jetter combination unit, which will both suck and flush. So so for wastewater division, we'll have a large Vector combination unit, and with this replacement of the existing jetter, we'll have a small Vector combination unit.
I'm glad you said that relatively slowly.
And I would encourage next year that he be on the finance discussion and presentation. I think you can make things a little more lively.
So what's the next one? Is there anything that just sucks?
Glad you asked.
That's expensive.
Okay, getting rummy now.
Can you move on to the last slide, please? So the last slide that I have for you is really right there.
The logo.
Second to last slide, sorry. It's really an overview of where we are in the equipment reserve fund. We basically are estimated by the end of the year we'll have $6 million sitting in there, and through the internal charges that we do every year, we add onto this fund $431,000, and then the scheduled purchases that we have discussed take into consideration obviously now the modification for the fire department, the reductions from there, and then lastly, the $400,000 was actually discussed yesterday. That is actually part of the budget strategy in order to close the gap for the general fund. So even with those, we still have what I consider a very healthy equipment reserve fund at $5.4 million. And the cost of all our general fund assets are approximately $8.2 million. So in my mind, there is really quite a bit of working capital and resources available to replace these assets going forward. Again, with the continuation of the departmental charges that take place on an annual basis.
And this figure is in line with the study, I guess, you provided us last month on safe level of a reserve?
That's correct. If I can bring that up again. The recommendation that was presented to the City Council was that we keep a reserve level of 50% of the acquisition cost of all the assets. So looking at the $8.2 million that we have, it's not this slide, minimum level, I'm sorry. Then obviously,
I knew that. I knew that.
Yes, obviously that works out to be mathematically 4.1, and obviously this is well above that level.
Okay.
And there was also additional information that was asked by council that would be presented back to us in regards to that, with the recommendation.
Yes, so we will come back with City Council at a future meeting to do a more comprehensive discussion, provide more comprehensive overview and discussion of not only equipment reserve fund, but also the general fund reserve recommendation.
And I know when you're saying that, but I also think that it's something that I want to better understand is when we say we have an apparatus or that is how old, and yet, let's say we'll use I'm the chief said, but we had 10 years old. Normally we replace it in 7 years. So I'm also interested to see where are we at those stages, because obviously we can put things off and put things off. Eventually they're going to catch up with you. Okay, so I understand what you're saying about that, but I also want to see if we talk about the engines and the squad cars and all those other vehicles that we have, and we've already pushed them off beyond what the expectancy is or the mileage. Okay, so I want to have a full picture before we believe or have this strong recommendation by staff that says, we have $1 million there that I believe, as you said, as the manager said, minimally we need to keep. So just so that there's a very clear, very tracked example of all what we have in our current fleet.
I just like to say, I'm not going to question the department as far as what their needs are and how old something is, but I think we need to be a lot more accurate. As we've got a 10-year-old fire apparatus that we're going to put off another year. What's the value of that asset? It's not $50,000. So the $8.2 million that you're talking about are assets. What is the true replacement? As far as new.
I think as another consideration, I think the staff does this, is that when we look at extending the life of a vehicle, obviously there's some cost-benefit analysis that takes place, which is to say, the cost of servicing that vehicle and keeping it up so that it actually can operate, does it outweigh the cost of replacing that vehicle? Because obviously we're not going to sink a whole bunch of money in maintenance and not, have a return on that when maybe the other decision obviously is to actually replace the vehicle, replace the apparatus, replace that piece of equipment. So that's part of the process that is undertaken when we make the decision whether or not to extend the life of a piece of equipment versus not.
Just it struck me. Do we sell these vehicles? Do they get sold somehow? I mean, because a vehicle, you know, what is that? An Expedition that's only got 47,000 miles on it. I mean, someone might buy it.
The answer is yes. Those vehicles are auctioned. They are not retained in the city's fleet. They are sold via auction, and there is
some return.
There's some. It's not a lot, but there's a small amount of revenue received.
Any other questions on equipment reserve?
Can I do that?
Okay. Mr. Mayor, this concludes the presentation that we had scheduled for this evening. We are happy and stand ready to take any questions on any of the topics that we have covered. Just again, as a housekeeping item, the City Council had tentatively scheduled another budget study session for tomorrow evening. At this point, because we are still working on final completion of the capital improvements program budget, I would suggest to you that it would be appropriate for you to consider now whether you would like to have that meeting tomorrow night, and it would be for the purpose of additional discussion on the matters that we have already covered with you over these last 2 nights. We would seek your pleasure on that.
I think we're good.
Great.
Okay.
You want to come back tomorrow?
All right, we will, this will come before the city council for a vote actually on June 22nd, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, so I want to remind the council that we haven't decided on anything, so if you have any more thoughts or additions or errors or omissions to discuss, that you get them to the city manager, we'll get some answers. So we still have a couple of 3 weeks before this actually gets decided. We've hashed it over pretty thoroughly, but there could be some items.
That's correct, and there were numbers of items that we've kept track of that council members have asked or commented about this evening and last evening. We will be assembling a comprehensive list of those and delivering that to you prior to the June 22nd. It will probably take us a little longer than I could promise you that it will be available to you at your next council meeting, which is next Tuesday. But sometime within the next week, we will deliver that list to you in order that you can evaluate whether there are additional issues, questions, comments, but at least you will have the information for your decision process to take place on June 22nd.
All right, thank you. And I would like to say, and if I may, with the permission of the council, how much we appreciate everybody's efforts in this very, very difficult time. It's been very hard for us, but harder for you. You're here all day long.
You gotta live it.
Yeah, you got to live it, and where the rubber meets the road and all of that stuff. It's just I can't say enough about your efforts, and pass that on to the department heads that aren't here tonight also, and in fact all of the employees, police, fire, public works, everybody that's been involved, because it's been a very difficult road the last couple of years. Hopefully we've seen the bottom. No way to tell as to what's going on in this economy now, but I just want to thank you personally for all of your efforts. Very, very much appreciated. And with that, if there's nothing else, we will adjourn to the next city council meeting, which will be at the Senior Center next Tuesday, June 8th.